The 50s were a golden age of music, but some of its brightest stars have been forgotten. Join us as we revisit 20 bands that rocked the world, yet somehow fell off the radar. You won't believe these stories. 20. The Bunnies. What if I told you that one of the most energetic and rebellious bands of the 1950s has nearly vanished from history? Emerging from the vibrant music scene of the 1950s, the Bunnies captivated audiences with their energetic performances and catchy tunes. Known for their tight harmonies and polished stage presence, they stood out in a decade brimming with musical innovation. Their hits resonated with the youth, who found in their music a sense of rebellion and excitement that mirrored the changing social landscape. Though not as widely remembered today as some of their contemporaries, the Bunnies played a crucial role in shaping the sound and style of early rock and roll. 19. Bill Haley and his Comets. Could you imagine a world where Rock Around the Clock never existed? That almost happened. Formed in the early 1950s, the band's lineup featured Bill Haley as the lead vocalist and rhythm guitarist, and the Comets include notable musicians such as Frankie Beecher on lead guitar, Billy Williamson on steel guitar, Johnny Grande on piano, Marshall Little on bass, and Dick Richards on drums. Their breakthrough moment came with the release of Rock Around the Clock in 1954, a song that became an anthem for the rock and roll generation. The energetic mix of Haley's vocals, Beecher's memorable guitar riffs, and the overall upbeat sound of the Comets set the stage for the rock revolution. Other hits like Shake, Rattle, and Roll and See You Later, Alligator further cemented their impact on the music scene. Bill Haley and his Comets' influence extended beyond the 1950s. They were among the first to bring rock and roll to a global audience, profoundly influencing the genre's evolution. The band's contributions have been widely recognized, and Rock Around the Clock remaining a timeless classic and a symbol of the transformative power of rock and roll. 18. The Isley Brothers. Did you know the harmonious voices behind Wake Up Little Susie were once the heartbeat of teenage rebellion? Founded in 1956 and composed of brothers Don and Phil Everly, the duo is known for songs like Wake Up Little Susie and Bye Bye Love. Their energy, attitude, and flair for the genre are impossible to miss, even as the two performed with poorly mic'd acoustic guitars. The duo was raised in a musical family, first appearing on the radio singing along with their father Ike Everly and mother Margaret Everly as the Everly family in the 1940s. When the brothers were still in high school, they gained the attention of prominent Nashville musicians like Chet Atkins, who began to promote them for national attention. The Everlys signed with Warner Brothers Records in 1960, with which they remained for 10 years. Their first hit for Warner Brothers, 1960's Kathy's Clown, which Don and Phil wrote and composed themselves, sold 8 million copies and became the duo's biggest selling record. Kathy's Clown was numbered WB1, the first selection Warner Brothers Records ever released in the United Kingdom. 17. The Penguins. Can you name the doo-wop group that broke through with one of the biggest cross-genre hits of the 50s? If you're an a cappella fan, you've probably heard of the Penguins. After starting out as an American vocal group, their music quickly spread and captivated the attention of people across the globe. They're known for their upbeat, fun doo-wop medleys and street music. Some of their most popular songs include Walkin' Down Broadway, I Knew I'd Fall in Love, Be Mine or Be a Fool, Kiss a Fool Goodbye, and Ookie Ook. The band is most widely recognized for the song Earth Angel, which started out as an R&B song but quickly crossed over to the pop charts. If you like lighthearted music and strong vocals, the Penguins are the band for you. 16. The Coasters. What happens when a band mixes music with comedy and breaks every mold in the process? The Coasters are one of those bands that don't fit into a single category. Made up of some of the most revolutionary African-American musicians of the decade, they're known for R&B sounds, rock and roll music, and their unique onstage performances that combined music with comedy. Some of their most well-known hits include Yakety Yak, Charlie Brown, Red Run Red, Little Egypt, and Along Came Jones. Their music became popular for two main reasons: their fun R&B beats and their impactful emotional lyrics. Many people felt a strong connection to the band, which explains why their music escalated on the pop charts. You'll definitely like the Coasters if personal inspirational lyrics resonate with you. 15. The Crickets. What would rock and roll look like without Buddy Holly's groundbreaking influence? The Crickets, a pioneering rock and roll group, was formed in Lubbock, Texas in the 1950s. The band's original lineup included Buddy Holly as lead vocalist and guitarist, Nicky Sullivan on rhythm guitar, Joe B. Malden on bass, and Jerry Allison on drums. One of their breakthrough hits, That'll Be the Day, propelled them to international stardom, showcasing Holly's unique vocal style and the band's dynamic musicality. The Crickets' influence extended beyond their success with Holly, contributing immensely to the development of the rock genre. Notable for their fusion of country, rockabilly, and rhythm and blues elements, the Crickets shaped the evolution of popular 50s bands and the type of music they played. Tragically, Holly's untimely death in 1959 marked the end of the original Crickets lineup, but their legacy stood the test of time. The Crickets continued to perform and record with various lineups over the years, solidifying their status as pioneers in the early days of rock and roll. Their impact on subsequent generations of musicians and the lasting popularity of their classic hits attest to the Crickets' significance in the history of rock music. 14. The Platters. Could there be a more iconic vocal group that defined the late 50s? Preeminent vocal group of the late 50s and early 60s, the Platters were hugely successful in the US as well as in England and Australia. Formed in Los Angeles in 1953, the original lineup of the Platters consisted of Tony Williams, lead vocals, David Lynch, tenor, Alex Hodge, baritone, and Herb Reed, bass. Later members included Zola Taylor, contralto, Paul Roby, baritone, Nate Nelson, Sonny Turner, Barbara Randolph, and Sandra Dawn. After being signed to Mercury Records by their manager Buck Ram, the Platters made their breakthrough hit in 1956 with Only You. This was followed by The Great Pretender, which made it to number 1 on the R&B charts, holding that spot for 11 weeks. The group performed both numbers on the screen in the musical Rock Around the Clock, 1956. During their heyday from 1956 to 1960, the Platters recorded a string of popular hits: The Magic Touch, My Prayer, You'll Never Know, Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, Twilight Time, Enchanted, and Harbor Lights, their final top 10 single. The original Platters were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1990 and into the Vocal Group Hall of Fame in 1998. There have been various groups since 1970 using the brand name, including the Buck Ram Platters, the Magic Platters based in France, the Legendary Platters, Canada, Zola Taylor's Platters, the Amazing Platters, Sonny Turner's Platters, and Herb Reed of the original Platters and his group. 13. The Clovers. Ever heard of the group that had more R&B hits than any other on Atlantic Records? The Clovers occupy an exalted place in the history of R&B, if not in the minds of many listeners, other than hardcore devotees of the music's history. The Drifters tend to eclipse them by virtue of their longer history and the string of hits that the later incarnation of that group had during the 1960s. The truth is that the Clovers not only started earlier than any other act on Atlantic, but they also scored more hits in their 6 years there than any other R&B act in the label's history. The group's origins, like those of so many R&B vocal outfits, go back to the members' middle teenage years. Tenor baritone Harold Hal Lucas, tenor Billy Shelton, and bass Robert Woods were students at Armstrong High School in Washington, D.C. during the mid-40s, when they formed a trio led by Lucas, who also came up with the name the Clovers. A fourth member, John Buddy Bailey, another tenor, joined up and eventually became their lead singer while Lucas started singing baritone. Their early sound was influenced by the likes of such professional outfits of the era as the Orioles and the Ravens. The Clovers switched to a ballad style in 1955 with the release of Blue Velvet, which was a modest success at number 14 on the R&B listings. Their next single, Devil or Angel, the latter an over-the-transom submission by an amateur songwriter named Blanche Carter, got to number 3, but that marked the end of their run of hits on Atlantic. Ironically, it was those last two singles, which were really the least representative of the sound of any of their hits, that became their best-known singles, getting the widest airplay, though their version of Devil or Angel was later eclipsed by Bobby V's recording. 12. Gene Vincent and his Blue Caps. What if I told you that one of the wildest bands of the 50s barely scratched the surface of their potential? In the mid-1950s, everyone in the music business was looking for the next Elvis. Enter Gene Vincent and the Blue Caps and their massive hit, the insinuating, catchy Bebop-A-Lula. One of the first self-contained rock and roll bands, Gene Vincent and the Blue Caps would relentlessly tour America, Europe, Australia, and Japan, introducing countless audiences to the untamed exuberance of rockabilly. Fresh out of the Navy in the spring of 1956, Vincent was spending time at the Norfolk, Virginia radio station WCMS, singing a ditty he had written or bought, depending on which story you believe, called Bebop-A-Lula. Bebop-A-Lula became a rockabilly classic, driven by Vincent's assured vocals and a rollicking performance by his backing band, the Blue Caps. Principal members of the Blue Caps included Cliff Gallup, whose stellar guitar work gave the band much of its exuberant sound, rhythm guitarist Irvin Wee Willie Williams, drummer Dickie Bebop Harrell, and bassist Jack Neal. Although Vincent would subsequently score minor hits, notably Race with the Devil and Lotta Lovin', he never equaled the success of his first. He continued to record and tour and remained popular in Britain, where in 1960 he re-injured his leg in the automobile accident in which fellow rockabilly singer Eddie Cochran was killed. Touring and drug and alcohol abuse eventually took their toll. Vincent died at age 36. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1998. The Blue Caps were selected for induction in 2012. 11. Billy Ward and his Dominoes. Imagine a vocal group with one of the finest musical pedigrees ever, and they started in the 40s. The Dominoes, also sometimes known as Billy Ward and the Dominoes, had one of the finest musical pedigrees of any R&B vocal group of the 1940s, at least based on its founders' training and experience. A lot of R&B acts came out of a gospel background, and Bo Diddley even studied violin as a boy. But rare is the R&B vocal group whose founder was trained at Juilliard. Following his military service during World War II, Ward studied at the Art Institute of Chicago and at the Juilliard School of Music in New York, where he later became a voice coach. He also began working on Broadway during the late 40s. It was from the ranks of his ex-students that he recruited the original members of the Dominoes, Clyde McPhatter as lead singer, Charlie White, tenor, Joe Lamont, baritone, and Bill Brown, bass. The Dominoes, with McPhatter's high tenor lead, had a startlingly fresh sound and enjoyed a number 6 R&B hit in early 1951 with one song from their first session, Do Something For Me. It was in May of that year that the group broke through to the top of the R&B charts with 60 Minute Man, which also established them as one of the leading crossover acts between gospel and blues. 10. Flat and Scruggs and the Foggy Mountain Boys.
Down the road here from me is an old holler tree where you lay.
Can you believe this bluegrass band changed the sound of American music forever? Flat and Scruggs and the Foggy Mountain Boys were instrumental in bringing bluegrass music into the mainstream during the 1950s. Their innovative sound, characterized by Earl Scruggs' pioneering banjo techniques and Lester Flatt's smooth guitar playing, bridged the gap between traditional Appalachian music and the burgeoning rock and roll movement. Their appearances on radio and television, including the popular Beverly Hillbillies theme song, helped them reach a wider audience and solidify their place in music history. The band's influence extended far beyond their genre, leaving an indelible mark on the evolution of American music. 9. The Drifters. What if I told you that one group defined the sound of the 50s, and yet their lineup kept changing? Formed in 1953, this group went through several iterations and even included legendary singer Benny King. But the band's first big moment of fame came in the 50s with hits like Ruby Baby and There Goes My Baby. The Drifters are a long-lived American doo-wop R&B band who helped create soul music with gospel-style vocals. The Drifters began in 1953 at the instigation of record producer Ahmet Ertegun and singer Clyde McPhatter. The early Drifters had several R&B hits. McPhatter left the group in 1954 when he was drafted, and a number of contentious personnel changes soon followed. Later, with Benny King's yearning sound on lead tenor, the group had several successive hits, including There Goes My Baby, number 1, 1959, This Magic Moment, number 4, 1960, I Count the Tears, number 17, 1960, and Save the Last Dance for Me, number 1, 1960. After King pursued a solo career, Rudy Lewis took on the lead vocals. The Drifters enjoyed continued popularity through 1964 with major pop and R&B hits, including Up on the Roof, On Broadway, and Under the Boardwalk. The group was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1988. Due to disputes over the rights to the name, today there are several groups who perform under the name The Drifters. 8. Little Richard and the Upsetters.
You claim he has the misery, but he having a lot of fun, oh baby. Yeah!
How did one band blend rock, funk, and even reggae to create an unforgettable sound? If you've ever wondered why some rock songs have a unique funk sound to them, you can thank Little Richard and the Upsetters. This rock and roll legend and house band duo is widely credited for bringing the rhythmic, soul-like sound of funk into the rock scene. Some of their hit songs include Chase the Devil, Return of Django, Croaking Lizard, One Step Forward, and Dread Lion. In addition to incorporating a unique new sound into rock music, the band made waves in the soul and gospel genres. It even collaborated with famed reggae artist Bob Marley. If you like music that jumps between genres and blends sounds, you'll probably appreciate the Upsetters. 7. Johnny Otis.
They had a little Willie Jr. and that ain't all.
What happens when an R&B legend decides to mix in some mambo? Most rhythm and blues fans have probably heard of Johnny Otis. In addition to being a huge influence in the R&B world, he also contributed his own unique sound to the field of rock music. However, what some fans might not realize is that he wasn't just a solo artist. He was also a member of a band. In the 1950s, he formed a musical group with the following artists: Wynonie Harris, Charles Brown, and Illinois Jacquet. Together, the band released popular songs like Harlem Nocturne. Johnny Otis also ventured into the mambo category and created the first ever R&B mambo hit. If you enjoy smooth, original R&B songs, you would definitely like his songs. 6. Hank Ballard and the Midnighters. Did you know the band that wrote The Twist was banned from the radio for being too risque? Hank Ballard and the Midnighters was a rhythm and blues band that were a major influence on the rock and roll genre beginning in the 1950s. They recorded a number of hugely popular songs and were known as the most risque R&B group of their time. They were the original recorders and original writers of The Twist, which brought forth an early 1960s dance craze after another artist, Chubby Checker, recorded a cover of the song. Hank Ballard was invited to join the Midnighters by band leader and multi-instrumentalist Johnny Otis. The band's original lineup, when they were still known as the Royals, included tenors Henry Booth and Jackie Wilson, and baritones Charles Sutton and Levi Stubbs. Both Wilson and Stubbs left the Royals and achieved greater fame. Wilson as a solo artist and Stubbs as the lead singer of the Four Tops. The Midnighters' first hit, Get It, was released 2 years later by Federal Records. Soon after, their second hit, Work With Me Annie, 1954, was released and banned from most radio stations due to its particularly explicit lyrics. Nonetheless, it became the #1 R&B hit of 1954, spending 7 weeks at the top of the chart and nearly topped the Pop Top 20 chart. Throughout their career, the Midnighters had 15 hit songs on the pop chart and 20 hit songs on the R&B chart, including Annie Had a Baby and Let's Go, Let's Go, Let's Go. 5. The Isley Brothers. Did you know one of rock's biggest legends got his start with this groundbreaking group? Formed in 1954, the group became legends in 1959 thanks to the song that will be a hit forever, Shout. The group is doubly famous because it was one of the first American bands to feature up-and-coming six-string player Jimi Hendrix before he became Jimi Hendrix. Initially a gospel quartet, the group was composed of Ronald, Rudolph, O'Kelly, and Vernon Isley. After Vernon's 1955 death in a bicycling accident, tenor Ronald was tapped as the remaining trio's lead vocalist. In 1957, the brothers went to New York City to record a string of failed doo-wop singles. While performing a spirited reading of the song Lonely Teardrops in Washington, D.C. 2 years later, they interjected the line, "You know you make me want to shout," which inspired frenzied audience feedback. An RCA executive in the audience saw the concert, and when he signed the Isleys soon after, he instructed that their first single be constructed around their crowd-pleasing catchphrase. While the call-and-response classic Shout failed to reach the Pop Top 40 on its initial release, it eventually became a frequently covered classic. 4. Johnny Burnett and the Rock and Roll Trio. What if I told you some of the wildest music of the 50s came from this relatively unknown band? The Rock and Roll Trio, as the three were eventually called, became instant pioneers of the genre with some of the wildest and most uninhibited music to ever come out of Memphis. Despite their relative obscurity, the two brothers, Johnny and Dorsey Burnett, paired with friend Paul Burleson, were as inventive and influential as anyone this side of Elvis Presley when it came to early rock and roll, especially in terms of their influence on artists who would go on to create heavy metal and punk. When the Memphis-based Rock and Roll Trio relocated to New York in the hopes of finding the fame that had eluded them in their native South, they signed with Coral Records and entered the studio, recording a total of 25 tracks for the label over 5 sessions between May 7th, 1956 and March 22nd, 1957. Tracks from the first 2 sessions, including several singles by the band, were collected and released in December 1956 as the band's first album. A number of the songs are regarded as classics of the rockabilly genre. Particularly, the trio penned Tear It Up, a single released on June 5th, 1956, and their definitive cover of Train Kept A-Rollin'. Tear It Up did not enter the charts but enjoyed regional popularity and has subsequently been covered by a number of artists, including Charlie Feathers, Rod Stewart, and Stray Cats. Even though the song was the band's first single on Coral, it was not originally included in the album, appearing on the CD re-release. 3. Sir John's Trio. Did you know Chuck Berry's most famous songs owe much to this lesser-known trio? Sir John's Trio is the collaboration between Chuck Berry and pianist Johnny Johnson. Chuck Berry, an iconic figure in rock and roll, initiated a musical collaboration with Johnny Johnson in the 1950s that would significantly influence the course of popular music. Known for his innovative guitar style and dynamic stage presence, Berry worked alongside Johnson's piano skills, creating a sound that became synonymous with the birth of rock and roll. Johnny Johnson, with his impeccable piano accompaniment, played a pivotal role in shaping the sound of Berry's most famous songs. Classics like Maybelline, Roll Over Beethoven, and Johnny Be Good exemplify the success of their collaboration. Their impact on both the music industry and other 50s bands was profound, as they bridged the gap between rhythm and blues and the emerging rock genre. Berry's storytelling lyrics, coupled with Johnson's musical skill, laid the groundwork for generations of rock musicians. 2. Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers. What if I told you the Jackson 5's success story began with this group? Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers, American vocal group popular in the mid-1950s, were prime exponents of the doo-wop vocal style. The members were Frankie Lyman, Herman Santiago, Jimmy Merchant, Joe Negroni, and Sherman Garnes. The broad-based success of this vocal ensemble helped signal the emergence of rock and roll as a part of mainstream teenage culture. The prepubescent soprano of the 13-year-old lead singer Lyman, sounding innocent and girlish, represented one of the most appealing sounds in early rock and roll, and many later pop groups would feature a preteen male lead, most notably the Jackson 5. The Teenagers' first successful record, Why Do Fools Fall in Love, 1956, was followed by 5 more singles that appeared on the national survey lists of the most popular records in the United States. The Teenagers also appeared in 2 popular rock and roll movies starring disc jockey Alan Freed, Rock, 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 1956, and Mr. Rock and Roll, 1957. In 1957, Lyman left the group to launch a solo career which failed when his changed adult voice and unremarkable tenor proved to have diminished commercial appeal. Long afflicted by a substance abuse problem, Lyman died in 1968 from a drug overdose. He and the group were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1993. 1. The Five Royales. What if I told you this band was the missing link between R&B and soul? The Five Royales were a relatively unheralded but significant link between early R&B and early soul in their combination of doo-wop, jump blues, and gospel styles. Their commercial success was relatively modest. They had 7 top 10 R&B hits in the 1950s, most recorded in the span of little over a year between late 1952 and late 1953. A few of their singles would prove extremely popular in cover versions by other artists, though. James Brown and Aretha Franklin tore it up with Think, Ray Charles covered Tell the Truth, and the Shirelles, and later the Mamas and the Papas, had pop success with Dedicated to the One I Love. Almost all of their material was written by guitarist Loman Pauling, who influenced Steve Cropper with his biting and bluesy guitar lines, which at their most ferocious almost sound like a precursor to blues rock. Although the group would remain on King for the rest of the 1950s, they would only enter the R&B top 10 2 more times, with Think and Tears of Joy both in 1957. Their later sides, however, are their best, as Pauling became much more assertive on the guitar, dashing off some piercing and fluid solos. Some of these solos are among the heaviest and wildest in 50s rock, on both relatively well-known cuts like Think and virtually unknown numbers like The Slummer the Slum. Greil Marcus once wrote something to the effect that a young Eric Clapton would have once paid to hold Pauling's coat. They remain primarily a harmony vocal group though, and if their late 50s sides are considerably more modernized than their early Apollo hits, they're still a lot closer to doo-wop than soul. Even when the records weren't selling, the Five Royales were a popular touring band. Their constant activity at King Records, in all likelihood, had some influence on the young James Brown, then starting his career on the same label. One of Brown's first big R&B hits was a frenetic cover of Think. They couldn't sustain themselves without more hits though. After leaving King and recording some more sides in the early 60s, they finally broke up by 1965. Thanks for tuning in to this nostalgic journey through the forgotten bands of the 50s. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and check out our other videos on music history. Keep the tunes alive. See you next time.